I was 40 at this point. Statistically, not great, but spiritually, I will also say this. I always knew that I was going to get pregnant.
Toby, you put your story onto Instagram and it went viral across a bunch of different media channels and outlets. And we're going to fill in some of the blanks on the story today. So thank you so much, Toby Fleischman, Lindsay Lencio, for showing up with me today to bring another example of an unconventional path to parenthood that totally worked out.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so happy to be here.
Yeah. Do you remember what year was it that we were working together?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those were good times. At least that was a very busy time for me. But Toby, you came into the Well Women acupuncture office first.
Yes.
Let's set the stage.
Yes. Well, I'm 7 years older than Lindsay. And so our plan,
In quotes.
Yeah, because that's a sort of a dirty word, but was that I was going to conceive first. And then in a few years, then Lindsay would conceive. And we started with a donor, and a known donor, and we were just trying at home. And that was about 5 or 6 months of that. And I wasn't getting pregnant. And we decided to meet with a fertility specialist at California Fertility Partners. And that is how we found you.
That's actually not true. It was through my coworker, Lori.
Oh.
Lori and Christy both went to see Danica when they were
you're
trying to get
right.
pregnant.
But then we found out that you did do
Yeah,
a lot
so
of
that
work
was just,
with California.
I think,
so that
a coincidence.
That's
Yes.
right.
Mhm.
Okay. So.
Yeah, I was like, wait, I thought that it happened differently too.
I was like, what's she going to say?
Yeah, well, this is the funny thing when we go back to do these stories. And I've used your story so many times to provide inspiration and to be like, yes, I know it feels like something you wouldn't really, like this wasn't your first idea. Maybe it didn't even show up for you, but this is one way of doing it. Let's open our mind. Let's keep our minds really open because I had to and it worked for me.
Yeah.
And here's this great story.
I think that's the headline that I take away from our experience and that I often try and give to other people all the time. Like, it doesn't always happen like you think it's going to happen, and just
It often doesn't.
Just be open to the different possibilities. And once you're open, that's when it comes.
Yeah, it's a good way for us to start the story with how it all worked out. Was that we all had a very open mind and we felt good talking to one another. It was always, when you guys would come in, it was always a bright dot on my day.
Well, that's nice because I don't think we were always coming in.
I know.
But it was, I think you and I saw each other for almost a year throughout this process, weekly. And I just remember, the ups and downs of all of that time, but this being such a stable, important part of that process that gave me so much, relief, but also it also pushed me in ways that I need to be pushed. And boy, I just remember those naps on your table too.
Well, and all the tools too. I think that you have a full toolbox now. For raising your kids, but we'll get to them. So you came in and we had some good conversations, and then you found your way over to California Fertility Partners. And I had in the notes pretty early on a mentioning of a uterine septum.
Correct.
But I feel like everything happens so quickly in the medical office appointments, and it's terminology that's unfamiliar, brand new, maybe triggering. And so maybe it slipped on by or something, but I had it in my notes. So like you relayed it to me, I wrote it down, but then you conceived.
Right.
So it's important to note that you to were using a Diva cup to self-inseminate at home.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Do we want to talk about the sperm donor?
Yes. So we, as I mentioned, we started with one donor, and then pretty early on in that process of meeting with the fertility specialist, or had we already moved away from that?
No, we met with a fertility specialist as we had his sperm tested, and she had mentioned that there was some concerns.
Yes. So that, that
ended.
And then that's when we were so fortunate to shift and find our donor that ultimately became our baby daddy.
Who was a friend of yours from like kindergarten or something,
Yeah, so we'd
right?
known each other since he was born. My mom and his mom were best friends growing up. And, you know, I'm a little bit older than him, so we kind of lost touch as, you get into middle school, high school, and we reconnected right around this time.
And the second I met him, I said to her, I wish it could be him.
It was interesting. We had a few kind of, strange connections where I just like randomly saw him on the street when he was visiting, and I was like, let's go out to dinner. And when we were having dinner, this was before we knew what was happening with our first donor.
It was around the time that
he said, if somebody ever asked me, I'd totally be open to this. And I remember that conversation. And then it was like months later, he was visiting again, and we kind of filled him in on what was happening. And he said, well, I'll do it. If you're asking me, I'll do it. So
yeah,
just the way it kind of seamlessly almost worked itself out. It was like meant to be.
Sometimes I still look back. I mean, she ran into him on the street.
Uh-huh.
Who runs into people in Los Angeles anywhere? Who's walking on a sidewalk?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like those moments are just so meant to be and really powerful when I think back.
Yeah. Well, this is where I tell some of my patients that we're like puppets. And and I don't know if the baby spirits are the puppet masters or the universal field of consciousness is pulling the strings. But clearly for all three of us with our baby daddies, we have this something beyond us moved the pieces and put it all in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And that's important for anybody listening to look over their past, to think of something that was challenging and then remember how it all worked out. Because when we're in it, we can't see clearly. But when we get past it, then we can look back and go like, oh yeah, that happened. So this would happen and this happened. It's all very linear looking back on it. But in it, it is really like walking into a labyrinth and, and on fire, people throwing darts at you and just kicking you in the stomach with the disappointments. I mean, like metaphorical, emotional, like what happens. So he said, well, if you're asking me, I'll do it.
So when that happened, we kind of just took off in that direction, and he was able to stay in town and work with California Fertility Partners and do all the testing. And we tried.
You were doing IUI.
We tried a couple times. He had to go back on his ship. So he's a research scientist and works on a research ship for months at a time. So he was getting ready to be away. So we were banking sperm, and we did a few IUIs. And I got pregnant.
One of them worked.
Yeah.
And then
I miscarried.
Right. And it was probably due to that septum.
Correct. And I had an HSG, which came back a little unconclusive. And so, at least we knew at that point. And we scheduled surgery to have the septum removed. And then, obviously that over that time, it took some time to come off of the miscarriage. It took some time for the surgery. It took some time for recovery. So that was a tough pause.
Yeah. And it was also like a weed in the garden that you didn't know you needed to pull.
Yes.
And then how sad that, you had already been trying for like a year, and then here you got it. And it seemed like, okay, we can close that chapter.
Yes.
But alas, no, a little more time, a little delay, a little hiccup.
Yes. So then,
but may I interject?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think that's where that hiccup, because you were really at the height of your reproductive potential, which means like good levels of estrogen. And there is this pang inside of women that's like, you feel it kind of in your chest and your heart. But I think it's the connection to the uterus as the second heart that's ready to be used. And so since it's not happening, there's that like ache. Yeah. And so you had that ache, and Lindsay picked up on that, and being the problem solver that she is, said, well, I'll do it. It's okay. I'll do it. Like, to comfort you.
That's a nice way to put it. I think I was more of I tend to be like a realist, and I was just thinking, we've tried this.
And we didn't speak about this, and I'm open about this. I was 40 at this point.
Yeah.
So, statistically, not great.
Yeah.
But spiritually, I will also say this. I always knew that I was going to get pregnant.
That's important.
Really had, I don't have this all the time about my life. I'm not super confident about things all the time in my life, but for this, I just knew that I was going to. So it was frustrating.
Yeah.
You could talk about that ache. I was definitely frustrated. And then for Lindsay, who, as I mentioned, is 7 years younger, being the realist, as she said.
I think also it was, you were having with the IUI, there were some issues where like the medication was causing like cysts or something. Then you had to like stop for a month. Yeah. So we were having all these roadblocks. And at this point I'm like, well, it's been a year. And then I was just like, you have to let me start trying. So even I had to feel like I could start trying whatever that was. And you were pushing back, and finally you were like, just go. What did I do? I went and got an ultrasound, and then I had polyps. So then I had to have this surgery. So there was like, that was the most frustrating, I think, time, because I just felt like it was already challenging for us because of the way in which we had to get pregnant. You can't, you can't just try and see what happens.
Right.
Like, we couldn't do that. And so I was very much, I had a lot of doubt. But in a way, if I didn't have any of that doubt,
we were talking about this the other night, because it's easy for us to joke now. And I had no idea that she had such doubt. She was not expressing that to me. But like after the fact, her and our baby's father would joke like, we didn't think it was going to happen for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like, I knew I was going to get pregnant. It was so interesting.
Right. And so this is why I was so grateful that you were willing to come on the pod to talk about this, because the news that came with your viral story didn't mention, wasn't like, it was too fresh to mention any of this part.
Sure.
And people, they can only handle so much. It's just like, oh my gosh, wives pregnant at the same time.
Right.
That is newsworthy. But there was this behind the scenes work that the three of us did, and including the Seed program.
Yes.
With all these little weeds in the garden, right? So being the person who was on the sidelines, because you came in first, and then Lindsay came in, and the three of us talked together, and then I'd work with you separate and with you, Lindsay, like on the weekends. And so I knew what was going on, and I knew it was going to be okay. I knew you had a high degree of fertile confidence, and I knew that you were data driven and the problem solver, and let's just get it done. Yes. Part of the equation here.
Yeah. And I mean, going into sort of the nuance of those weekly meetings with you, just the support that you give in not only, the physical, the acupuncture, which was so wonderful. And I talk about those naps because it just
your
was
schedule was crazy.
It put me into just such like a transcendent state of consciousness. And just, I would come in and I would be so upset about where we were, or so hopeful and full of that sort of anxious hope and that roller coaster ride that is the fertility journey. And those months seem like years. And this was such a beautiful place to come and to have you gently guiding us into what we needed to let go of. And what we needed to focus on and what we needed to hold on to. I'm kind of a controlling person.
Well, I was going to say, it was for you. You were able to, coming here allowed you to let go. Because I think the two of you even had a conversation where you were like, well, we can't be pregnant. You were just like, we can't be pregnant at the same time. And you were just like,
you were really clear.
And you were just like, oh, okay. And then you were like,
against it.
Go ahead and start.
Everyone always says like, oh, did you plan it? Did you plan to be pregnant at the same time? And I said, well, no, but we obviously knew it was a possibility, but I was against it at first.
Yeah.
I thought
you were so
insane.
Because when I said, let me go, let me start, you
took it as I have to stop.
So we would be battling because I would say, let me go. I'm ready to go. And you were like, I'm not ready to stop.
Yeah.
And it's not like those two things,
had to be.
Yeah. And you were very helpful in having me understand that I had to be open to that possibility that it was going to happen in a different way than I had thought.
Yeah. Well, in Chinese medicine, frustration, resentments, anger, that's all liver stuff.
Yeah.
And then it mixes really well with spleen stuff, which is like worry and overthinking and a need to be in control.
Yeah.
And so I knew that you had this worry going on that like so many other women have, that's like, oh, friend's sister-in-law, my cousin's pregnant, she's posting her pregnancy. And there's this erroneous belief that if it's happening for another woman on the radar, that it's not, that there's a shortage, then it's not going to happen for her. And so that might have been completely in the subconscious that really wasn't something that was in my mind because I wasn't on social media. That's where my roadblock was. I was like, no way am I going to get into that mess. I want to be here and help my patients. So I'm doing like anyway, that's not about me. In that moment, I was like, able to see that another worry you had was, what if I get pregnant? I'm sick all the time and I need her to help me because I'm too weak or I'm vomiting or I'm scared, or if I go into labor and then she can't be with me because she's throwing up with her own pregnancy. So it was really like so futuristic, which those are patterns that we learn as little kids at the time for whatever reason.
The what ifs.
Yeah. Try to control everything as much as you can so that everything stays okay. Like that's a thing.
But I have to say, like, just touching on the Seed program, I mean, that was such an amazing outlet for someone who likes to control things, to have that
daily.
Yeah, to have that and to be able to control my diet. And ultimately, I had cut out alcohol from my life and really focused and made sacrifices with work stuff to really focus on this, and had really done the work sort of psychologically and emotionally to just be in that moment, but to be able to grab onto the Seed program and have that as sort of what I could control was really important.
You really ran with it.
Yeah.
Because it was like food as fertile medicine, and to be able to have this resource, now it functions as an app.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. But back then it was like a website, an early website, and some affirmations and stuff. Now we have meditations and various different things. So it's great. Like today you'll be feeling like having a quesadilla.
Yeah.
Is very different than some other ways of explaining.
I always recommend it. It was so wonderful to have that resource. Yeah.
Well, what was really interesting is we were talking about weeds in the garden And then Lindsay gets her diagnosis of polyps.
Yeah.
So then you come in for acupuncture. You start using the Seed program. I can only imagine what it was like. I know what the refrigerator must have looked like with some cultured vegetables, some raw milk.
That's like the only time we went to Erewhon, like frequently.
Yes, for the raw milk and the unpasteurized cheese and drinking our those shakes.
But your cycles would have been at different times, kind of, right?
They were.
Yeah.
They were.
But it was nice. It's like with anything, if you're doing it with your partner, it makes it was in a way almost fun, and like we could be doing it together and talking about it and going shopping together. And
sure, you need to be eating red this week.
Well,
so using the Seed program, as you went in there and you kind of put your eyes on it, I think when she had it, you were like, "What are you doing, honey?"
Yes.
And like taking a look at it, that kind of opened it up, and then for you to feel. She can be supportive. If I get sick, she's totally there with me. Then the conversation and the softening to, I don't know. Well, you know what? Maybe why not?
Yeah.
And then the polyps were removed, and
then Rennie was back. Our boy's dad, he was back from the ship, and that was a big instigator for Lindsay too, being like, well, the convenience, like he's here. We should just start
for
trying.
A couple of months.
It's free. She said, what if it takes me a little while? So why don't I just start now? And again,
you were open to it.
At first,
everything was kind of aligned where you were open to that. And then we were both trying different cycles, but both trying.
And then I got pregnant, and we found out that
we should tell about how the time you got pregnant, you were supposed to be in New York.
Right.
And we were walking on the beach, and you were trying to decide whether or not you should come home early.
I had a big work trip. Yeah. And it overlapped on my ovulation. And I said,
and I usually would control those things. And then we were on the beach. I just remember this. We were on the beach, and I said, whatever you want to do is the right decision. You decide.
Yeah.
And I thought you were going to say, I'm going to stay at work. This is important. And you looked at me and you were like, I'm coming home.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. I support that.
So I came home early, and I remember I asked you, I was like, I want to do some cupping before when I get off the plane, because I just feel like I need to relax and move the energy around. And I saw you, and then that was the time that I ended up conceiving. And so we found out that I was pregnant on the day that I got the HSG.
Yeah, because I was all loopy on like Valium or something.
And that was and
we had that trip with your parents.
Yeah, and we went to see my parents, and we told them, like, it was the day literally we got the numbers back. We were waiting on I did blood work. I took you to your HSG. We drove to see my family in Orange County, and
we had low estrogen.
We had some low estrogen.
So we had to go to the CVS.
We picked up some prescriptions down there, and then a couple weeks later, you were ovulating.
Yeah.
Well, so you would have had the HSG before cycle day 10. Yeah. So it would have been the next week.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
It was the following week, and Rennie was still in town.
Yeah, he was there, and I was like, all right.
And I said, you're going to get pregnant. I know it.
And I was like, great.
Aren't you both Libras too?
Yeah, we're 1 day apart. One day and 7 years.
Apart.
Yeah, 7 years and 1 day, yeah.
Yeah, so the astrology was there to support clearly.
The balance, yeah.
Yeah, but I know, well, anyway, that's another episode, the astrology part of it. But now looking back, so you ovulate, use the Diva cup, and then I remember seeing you. Well, what was it like? Because were you kind of thinking it's going to take a while, or did you think
I think it was going to take a while, and I that was my thought, because
after watching her,
and I was, ready for it, kind of thing. I tried a couple times. I think I tried that. This was my third try, and I remember being disappointed. But then being like, you know what? We got to trust this process. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. And also what was kind of nice is when you got pregnant, I was just like really immediately focused on you.
Yes, you were.
I was not focused on myself and am I going to get pregnant this time? I was really just going, okay, if it happens, it happens, because I'm focused on you right now. How are you feeling? You know, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
And
you were great. You were noticeably, I mean, you're always great, but you dialed it up even further. Just so caring and nurturing, which was the worry that you had. It was unfounded because of course, she showed up. And what I noticed is that is the epitome of the spirit of a mother, where she's nurturing everyone else. Mm-hmm. That's where that blends in with the healthy amount of fertile confidence that you already obviously had. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, oh my God, they're both going to be pregnant and like 3 weeks apart.
Yeah.
So did you feel sick, Toby, with your pregnancy? Were you nauseated?
Like a day. She had like one day.
I had a couple weeks of slight nausea, but I was pretty good. I had a pretty easy pregnancy. I had a little hiccup in the beginning, where I had a little bleed.
A little scare.
And then I just did a couple weeks of bed rest and it went away.
I
took some progesterone, and it went away. So that was a little concern in the beginning, but otherwise my pregnancy was pretty easy. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate, and I loved being pregnant. Like, I enjoyed every minute of it, and really leaned into it. Lindsay did not have the same experience.
So here we fast forward. You get your pregnancy test. Did you have early pregnancy signs and symptoms? Were you thinking, I think it worked?
No. Looking back on it, like I think I did. But I don't know. Hindsight's 20/20. But the story that I remember was I was like newly pregnant and not, what was it? A few weeks or something, 5 weeks pregnant. And she went to the doctor, not at California Fertility, but you graduated. So we're at UCLA.
This is a tough one. Yeah.
And
so at the fertility clinic, obviously they track you so frequently, right? Like every week,
you're
testing,
having all these
ultrasounds and everything. And, but when you're in a regular doctor's office, you don't see them. But so because I had graduated, I was seeing my OB/GYN, and we're having our first appointment. So
it would have been the first appointment.
But she was still very early. So it was only
so it was early, and we're meeting the OB for the first time, and then we're introducing ourselves, and I go, well, I'm also pregnant. She was like, oh wow, that's great. How far along? And tell her, and she's like, okay, well, we could do an ultrasound with you today too. And I remember thinking, ooh, okay, all right. And I don't know if you remember this, but she has her ultrasound. We see the heartbeat. It's all like, and then it's my turn. And she's like, well, I don't see the heartbeat, but it's too soon, so don't worry about it. And telling me not to worry about it.
I do remember.
And it was like, we had taken the day off. It was during the week. We were going to go to like Palm Springs and have a day there. And I was so upset. Trying not to think about it. And I woke up the next day and I was like, I feel like sick to my stomach. Like, I was nauseous. And I'm like, I'm so upset that now I'm nauseous. And I'm not like thinking later, I was like, oh, I was starting to like have morning sickness. And then I saw you, Danica, like the next day. And I told you what happened. And I still I don't remember much of anything, but I remember this. You said, you have to forgive that doctor for having you do that ultrasound too soon. You just said it like that. Like, I didn't even know I had to forgive her or anything. And I go, okay, all right, great. And I remember, I think about that and apply it to lots of things in my life. You have to forgive that person. If I'm feeling upset, just forgive them for that. And then, ultimately a couple weeks later, we went back in, we had the ultrasound.
It seemed like a couple weeks, but I think it was just a few days.
Maybe a week.
Yeah.
Wait, was it?
Yes. It certainly seemed like
I guess she was like, come back in a week or something. It felt like 800 years.
Yes.
And then they're like, there he is up on the screen with his little heartbeat.
We didn't know it was a he yet, but yes.
We didn't. And it was like December 3rd. And I remember holding the piece of paper and like going to work because it was like right before Christmas and like showing everybody. I was like so relieved.
So she was a little bit sicker.
Yeah, and then I was sick the first trimester.
You were. But then also had a very easy normal pregnancy, so we were very lucky.
I mean, like relatively speaking, it probably wasn't awful. My sister was really sick her entire pregnancy, so
yeah.
Well, what I remember is wondering what it would be like with the emotions for both of you to be in this at the same time, this new terrain, to experience it as besties, as wives. How wonderful. So, yeah, my therapist calls forgiveness the F word. So I should touch on that really quickly. I'm all about like using compassion as a way to move through this life with less scathing and to keep the energy aligning and balanced and as neutral as possible. So I'm glad that you remembered that, because so many injustices happen to us, perceived injustices too, when we are on this path. But that I knew the details of your pregnancy, so I knew that there wouldn't be a heartbeat showing up at that time. But this was your very early pregnancy. You didn't know how to communicate that, but your insight was a little, or your intuition was kind of like, I don't know, like nobody's told me that's my next step.
Yeah.
So there's that. So I'm glad. But the other thing is, I'm also really about bringing back joy and inserting joy into this situation for thousands of women that's too heavily skewed in despondency, the focus on what's not there. And so when we can bring it into a more joyous thing where we had learned about gratitude together, your gratitude for Lindsay and your gratitude for your own healthy upbringing and your state of mind, and the different things that we could be putting in the scale to tip these Libra scales over here to be like, we are in the abundance. There's so much love between the two of you, so much support. And so that scale was tipped. And that's how I was like, this is a time where this couple needs to do this together. And seeing the boys that came from this, they are so much
They're
joy,
so magical.
right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward through the pregnancy to preparing to deliver these guys.
Yeah, or finding out they're boys.
Yeah. And so then your viral moment.
We were both convinced we were going to have girls.
We think about that because, we're like, well, people would ask, like, why did you think they were girls? And we're like, we don't know.
Yeah, I think we just thought like our relationships with our mothers, like we were just destined to sort of like
both raise.
Yeah, but we were going to get what we deserved kind of as far as having daughters.
But we did. Like, it's so strange. It's like when you think you know what you deserve and what you want, it's like, no, that wasn't supposed to be it at all.
Even when obviously I was a few weeks ahead, so I found out first that I was having a boy, and even then it was like, well, I guess we're having one of each. We still didn't even come into our minds that we could have two boys. So when we found out that you were having a boy too, it was just
I was at work. We were FaceTiming. Yeah. We opened the letter, whatever, and
we were just like, wow.
I was like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And now, of course,
now we're always like, thank gosh we had boys. Thank gosh, thank goodness we have boys.
I mean, girls are great too.
Yes. You get what you're supposed to have.
I think we were, no matter what, who knows, but they are the most wonderful little people. Yeah. They're also very similar to us, which is strange.
You said it when you saw the picture.
And parenting them, I guess I didn't know because I had no idea, but it's still like you get that healing piece of parenting a boy is the same way you would parent a girl. Like it's not just being a different parent.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of the work that I started with you, I think I think you recommended that grief handbook, didn't you?
Yes, the grief, of course.
And that handbook for me was a really important part, I think, to open up things that I needed to sort of deal with.
Thanks for remembering that.
Yeah.
Looking over life as a timeline,
yes, that
and
timeline.
reconciling, making amends within yourself with life stuff that happens that creates who we are, and then who you were at the time of conception was the snapshot starting point for you delivered Reese?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was his starting point, was you having this moment of like clean slate, all is forgotten and forgiven, or at least reconciled to the best of my ability for right now.
Yeah. So that was really I see that as like a real starting point for me. And when, of course, and then you have kids, and it is a whole nother level of learning about yourself. And for me, wanting to break those chains wide open and start new and start better. And so it's been both healing and triggering being a parent, because I think it, showed me sort of some of the things that could have gone different when I was a child. It didn't maybe go as well as I had want them to go. And
also, if I could interrupt, there's, because your kids are now the age that they're 6 years old, and that's how old my son was when we were working together. So what's coming around the bend for you guys, it's like they really turn into the versions of you where, like, I mean, it just definitely changes, and you will see how they become really independent and everything. And the work that you do is able to
come back
meet
to you.
And meet them. And you're going to look and you may have a moment of triggering, but then you're going to have these moments of
healing.
I am prepared for this, and I can help you navigate
Sure.
getting older and being in a situation like my kids. Their friends were all their school friends had a mommy and a dad that were married. Now, my kids lived with me and Dan, and we were not married. So they felt a little bit different. But when all of our friends, those couples started divorcing, it was Danica and Dan that held it together for the longest, because we did not have those kinds of expectations. Romantic expectations and things. So these unconventional parenting scenarios that are set up from the beginning, where the kids came through challenges, those are really resilient kids. And they're so unique.
It's always important for us to show Reese and Fox the different ways that families can come. And, we're lucky that we have a number of same-sex families that are around us and are in our community, and families that just have one mom, or families that just have one dad, or, whatever a family looks like, it might look different, but it's all a family. You have two moms and a dad. Some people have two dads. Some people have two moms, so, it's wonderful that kids now are just so open to that. And it's just the way it is.
And we're lucky about, where we live.
Sure.
And the year.
Yeah.
I think those are good things too.
Sure.
But I was prepared for, there's been moments where they were little, they were like 4 playing soccer or something. And one of the little boys playing with them, Toby was, I don't know, being Toby, being loud. And the little boy said, "Is that your mom?" And Maurice or Fox goes, "Yeah, that's my mom." "Well, that's one of my moms. My other one's over there." And the little boy goes, "Cool." So I was just waiting to be like, what's he going to say? But, it's not it doesn't seem to be much of a thing, which is nice. I think I had a fear that they would feel, different, but it doesn't really impact them.
Yes, they're definitely set up now to be supported more than ever.
Yeah.
I think we could say that.
I mean, and I think that's another positive part about our unconventional family is that they have, not only do they have 2 moms and a dad, but then they have 3 sets of grandparents and, a
bunch
cousins,
of uncles and
aunts, and, it's just more family and more love. And
well, also we think of having 2 kids usually. So you each only had to do pregnancy once, and you got to.
I say twins the easy way is what I always say.
Twins the fun way.
Yeah. So ultimately, they ended up being. We were 18 days apart, our due dates, but I was late and she was early, so they were ultimately 12 days apart.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And for a long time when they were little, we would, the checkout lady. Yes, they're twins. Yes, they're twins.
Yeah,
we're not
going to tell easier than trying to tell that story to everybody.
Sometimes we would tell the story, but it's interesting now that they're older.
Well, they caught on real quick.
They do.
Like
and
once they were 3, they would be like, we're not twins.
So they know, and it's wild to hear them tell the story now. And
so let's talk about going into labor.
Yes.
What was that like?
That was our biggest fear.
That was you go through the pregnancy, and suddenly I was like, oh no, how are we going to do this?
And we don't have any family that lives close to us. So we were on our own.
And so you were going to be induced. Like if we had a plan, if he didn't come by a certain date, you were going to be induced.
Right. So it was a few days after my due date.
We were driving into the hospital, and then they called us and they said, "Can you come back on Thursday?" And we're like, "No, we cannot.
We're coming in.
I'm sorry that it's July and everyone wants to have babies right now, but we are coming in to be induced today."
So I got induced. I had,
which is not fun, by the way. They don't really prepare you for.
There's something called a balloon that takes you from...
Yeah, did you use the balloon?
Yeah.
Takes you from 0 to 4 real quick.
Yeah.
That was not fun. But then it took me a while to get to 10 centimeters.
So while this is happening for her and you're knowing that you're going to be doing it next, were you like...
Yeah, I mean, this was terrible.
And it was wild. She's 10 months pregnant, basically.
And, the hospital, I mean, I love where UCLA, go UCLA. It was not really set up for my comfort. Like, I'm literally sitting in a chair, 9 months pregnant. And they were doing like a hospital tour with all the women, and we were in an overflow area. So there's this tour of people going by. She's walking around because she's in like level 10 pain. They had a registry nurse who I'm saying she's in pain. And the registry nurse says, try some tapping. Try tapping. And finally things,
yeah.
I mean, we didn't finally even get to then it got even more crazy.
Well, I had an epidural. It took me a while to get to 10 centimeters. After the epidural, my water broke at some point, and he was in distress during contractions. And being in a wonderful teaching hospital that we are, they were not only saying things like, "Is the OR prepped?" But they said, "Well, we could try this thing where they refilled my water."
They refilled the bag of water.
And so they did that. Everyone's like, "With what?" I'm like, "I don't know." So they refilled my water, and that gave him more of a cushion during contraction.
So it did work.
And I got to 10. And then I got to 10, moved me into the delivery room, and they were leisurely setting up. And she took a shower. Yeah, because they're thinking it's going to take a really long time. And, okay, we're going to practice. Go ahead and let's do a practice push. And then they were like, hold up. Like, stop pushing. Like, the doctor's not here yet. And so he came flying out. Yeah. I mean, it was like one push. He came flying out. It felt like a bucket of water
literally
came out
that bag of water splashed on the ground,
and I kept saying to her, just
and I wouldn't
close.
Look. So I was like, I wouldn't. I was staying
about
up here.
to do this. Don't.
They're like, do you want to cut the cord? I was like, no, I want nothing to. I don't want to witness anything right now. I'm just trying to keep it together mentally.
And this baby with big blue eyes, wide open eyes. I mean, that was the most jarring part, is his eyes were wide open. Even the nurses was like, oh, he's so alert.
Just like right from the beginning.
And yeah, so that was our birthing story. And then we took him home and had 10 beautiful days with just him. And then we were feeding him one night.
Well, I woke up that morning and I was like, I think
you were having contractions,
but they were far apart. And it was like a Friday evening and you were feeding Reese. Mm-hmm. And I just jumped off the bed and ran into the bathroom. Because it's like, I didn't know what it was like when your water broke. I had no idea. And I was like, oh, this is my water breaking. So here we are with a newborn baby. You're postpartum.
We had a night nurse who was sort of on call for us. We knew like that this was coming soon.
But she had a day job, so we knew she would be available on the weekend. So Fox was like, all right, it's Friday night. Let's go break this water.
And then the next day we had an interview with this like incredible like neonatal nurse that we were going to like leave Reese home alone with.
Again, our plan was to do this.
So our plan was that we were going to hire this nurse so that when we had to go to the hospital, she would come and take care of Reese. And then we had the night nurse.
Because you can't take a baby
into the hospital.
Like, and these are things that you don't think about, but like, of course you can't take a baby or a child in there during this.
Right.
Yeah.
So the night nurse comes to the house, takes Reese. We go to the hospital.
Was Reese taking a bottle so that the night nurse?
Yes.
Okay. So at least that was.
Yes. We go to the hospital. They try and check me in again.
They print it out.
So, nope, it's their
turn. They recognize the error. UCLA, you did great.
And then you had a longer labor. You labored for a while, like 24 hours.
No, almost.
A little
they had
more.
To start. I wasn't dilated, so I had to take Pitocin. Again, these are things that like you wish someone would have told me, like, you're going to start contracting right away and it's going to be incredibly painful. So I went in there and like ate a turkey sandwich and then immediately had like, I wasn't in pain, then had next level pain. And then, they're asking me and I'm like, it's a 9. They're like, okay, we'll give you some morphine, which is like, they might as well have just given me a glass of water. It didn't do anything. And then then they came in again. And I said, this is the worst pain I've ever been in. And they're like, well, we can give you an epidural. And I was like, well, can we please do that? Yes, please. Like, I'm not trying to do any kind of natural birth situation. Like, I want the painkillers. Then I was okay. I was nasty to you. But I was fine. I was very nasty.
So while she's having contractions, the night nurse is interviewing the other nurse at our house. Because I was
our newborn baby.
Without you guys there.
I'm like chiming in on the monitor. I'm watching on the monitor. They ended up like sharing a past family before, and they knew each other, and she seemed wonderful. So
because basically she had to fill in on Monday when this other nurse had to go to her other job.
So we left Reese with a total stranger. I
guess it was Saturday night.
Yeah, it was Saturday night.
I'm sorry, I'm like messing up the timeline.
And then you had active labor for about 2 hours. We weren't sure how much longer they were going to let her go.
Yeah, it was like at the mark where, because you were so quick.
Yeah.
And that's another thing they don't tell you. Like, it didn't, I obviously had the epidural and it wasn't painful at all. But to me, it was like you're running a race and you just want to stop running this race. Mm-hmm. It really is like that. That's what active labor is like. Like, I wanted to stop running and I couldn't stop running until it was over.
When he finally came out and he had a short cord. So his cord snapped when he came out.
Yeah.
But they were able to clamp it pretty quick. So
but it was like this scary moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, he's out. And then they put him on my chest and then they picked him up really quick. And I'm like lying back. And again, she comes over to me and I say, go to him.
Yeah.
It's like my first selfless thing I ever did. Go to him, and he was quickly fine, but it was like this kind of scary
it was a moment. Of definitely nerve-wracking moment, but he was okay. And then we brought him home, and then we had 2.
Mm-hmm. It's such a wonderful story.
Yeah.
You guys, I love it. Thank you so much for
thanks for being a part of it.
That. So for women that are listening, what's your thoughts on getting your mind as open as possible? I'd like to hear from both of you. Getting your mind as open as possible when, like, some women don't want to use a donor egg. Some women don't want to use a surrogate. Some women are trying alone and they're freezing eggs and then they have to freeze as embryos with a sperm donor, and they don't want to do that either.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of those I don't want to do this. I just think, like you had said before, letting go of how you think it's going to happen and just focusing on the becoming a parent part. And that can happen in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I think reading, not to be your publicist, but I think reading Stick It To Me also was really important for me, because just getting those samples of so many different kinds of women and so many different experiences, and just focusing on, like, my experience is my own. I can't compare it to anyone else's. And just like the trust, I think, in having it happen in the way that it's supposed to happen.
Yeah, I think it's been helpful with more women coming and talking about having challenges getting pregnant. Because I think, for some time, it's like, we didn't talk about miscarriages. You don't talk about miscarriages. You don't talk about these things. It's something maybe you keep in secret. So I think sharing those things, to me, it's really important to talk about the challenges, not just, okay, everything's Instagram and, we got pregnant, yay, we're having a baby. Like, there's
so much that goes into that.
Even those people that are like, yay, we're having a baby, like, maybe they tried for 3 years before.
Right. The pieces of the story that we don't know and that aren't shared. Like in your viral story, there was a big chunk missing, but I would be the only one, really, one of a handful of people that knew that big chunk was missing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because the tendency on social is to either make it so horrible and horrendous or so plasticky good and sweet, but there's everything in between.
Right.
And I think that, like, the three of us have kind of just helped the listeners to think, oh yeah,
it can happen in so many different ways.
I think too, you said it when you're like, being open. That doesn't mean choosing another path. It just means saying, okay, there's different avenues here. Like, when we first started, it's almost comical to think how much control we thought we would have over this. Like, you were like, I will never do IVF. We're like, okay, you will never do IVF. We know that now. And then through the process, you were like,
well, maybe I would consider
do IVF. And like, I think it's just important too, to be like, oh, we would never get pregnant at the same time. It's just like, why you're holding on to that too. I think it's important to ask yourself those questions, to say, like, well, why would I not be open to that?
Yeah.
Right.
Really asking yourself those questions.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And hearing the answer to know, like, I was not willing to do it with my kid's dad initially, but fast forward 6 years and 4 breakups later. And then for 5 of those 6 years, hearing every day almost this little girl's voice telling me his last name, then I got used to the idea, but I wasn't willing to call him again because I had already asked, and I knew that he needed to be mature enough to show up himself to offer it. Because I didn't want to have resentment. So to wrap up, let's talk about Rennie. What's his role in the boys' lives, and what's it like, do you think, as much as you can speak for him?
Sure. We feel so lucky. We always say he's the perfect amount of involved and the perfect amount of not involved.
That's great.
And we couldn't have asked for a better father for our boys, or a better sort of co-parent.
I think too, and it could be something we could have been afraid of too, or not open to. Like, what do you mean there's going to be a third party there? Yeah. And I had moments too. I think right after you gave birth, I felt strange and being like, well, what's this going to be like? And people were saying, oh, he looks just like one of the cousins or the, and I felt removed. And I never had that feeling again. Like, he may discipline the boys about something. I'm like, he has every right to do that. Yeah. It's just, yeah, of course. Everything that he does. Yeah, of course. Or he's on a ship for 6 months. Yeah, of course.
And they're used to that. That's always how it's been. So
that's how it is with Kira and Jack and their dad and mom.
Yeah. So that's how it is. And they miss him and they're excited when he comes back, but we've been very lucky that they've been very secure in that.
Sure. Well, they're also going to respond to how you guys are acting. So if
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure this adds a special layer to his life that he wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah. And he says, like, I feel he's very lucky too, because if he meets someone and decides to have kids, great. And if he meets someone and decides not to, then he's got
the boys.
Yeah.
This is such a heart's full story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You guys, I love this story. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being a part of it. Huge part of it.
It was fun. It really was fun for me.
It was fun for our OB too. I think she wished we had gone into labor at the same time.
Oh man, I don't know. Well, we know it happens how it happens, right?
Yes. There was a good amount of time in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.